Today's story is from the northern Spain. It's written by Andrew Long in 1906. Close your eyes, relax, and listen to the story. The Girl Who Became a Fish. Once, there was a girl who lived by the river, and all she ever wanted to do was to dance around the house or go out with her friends. Her mother and father worked hard all day, but she never offered to help them, not once. One day, though, something strange came over her. "Sit down, Mother," she said. "You're looking very tired. Is there anything I can do to help?" Her mother slumped into a chair, amazed to hear such kind words from her lazy daughter. "Well, yes, there is something, dear. Could you take your father's fishing net out and mend any holes you can see?" So the girl did as she was asked. She bundled up the net in her arms, took it out to the riverbank, found a comfortable place to sit, and spent the morning mending holes until there was not a single one to be found. She enjoyed herself too, for everyone who went past, up and down the river on either side, stopped for a chat and to tell her how good it was to see her helping with the chores. The girl was just folding the net to carry it back in when she heard a splash. Looking around, she saw a mighty fish jumping clear of the water. Quick as a flash, she spread the net wide and threw it out over the river. Hauling it back in, she was delighted to see the fish thrashing about inside. "Got you!" she cried happily, for it was her first ever catch. Then she looked more closely at the brightly colored fish. "Aren't you a beauty? Father will be proud of me." But the fish stared back up at her with his sea-green eyes and replied, "You'd better not eat me, girl, for if you do, I'll turn you into a fish yourself." "Huh?" cried the girl, for she did not believe a word of it. Running straight to her mother, she led the old woman over to the riverbank. "Come and see what I've caught. It's a talking fish, and it just told me that if I ate it, it'll turn me into a fish too." And she nearly doubled over with laughter. But it was no laughing matter to her wise old mother. "Put the thing back, girl," she pleaded, "for it must have magical powers. Put it back in the water before something terrible happens." "Don't be silly, Mother. We can't afford to waste such a wonderful catch. And I'm so hungry after working hard all morning. Go cook it, Mother dear, and I'll be in to eat it in a few minutes." So the old mother, with a heavy heart, took the fish inside, and the young girl ran off to gather flowers for her hair. When she came back in, there was the fish, served up on a platter in the middle of the table. "It looks absolutely delicious," cried the hungry girl, plunging her fork into the dish and helping herself to a large piece. But as soon as it touched her mouth, a cold shiver ran through her. Her head seemed to flatten. Her eyes began to dart all around. Her arms and legs stuck to her sides, and she found herself gasping widely for breath. Then spying the open window, she sprang through it with one great leap and landed with a splash in the cold, clear river. Her horrified parents ran after her, but all they could see was a shoal of fish circling around in the water, and had no way of knowing which was their daughter. Her father rushed to fetch his net, but by the time he came back, they had swum off, down toward the sea. "What sort of fish are you?" asked the others, crowding around the shocked little fish girl. "Where have you come from?" "I'm not a fish at all." The newcomer spluttered, swallowing a load of water as she spoke. "I'm a girl, or at least I was until—" And she turned away, for she did not want them to see her crying. "Until you caught a fish, I'd imagine," said a wise old haddock. "And you didn't believe it had the power to carry out its threat, did you? Well, never mind. The same thing happened to some of us here, and it's not such a bad life. Come along to meet our queen, for she lives in a beautiful palace." So off they went, a great shoal of them, and the new little fish girl was amazed at everything there was to see. Jellyfish and multicolored seaweeds floating just below the surface, and further out and deeper. Great sunken acres, broken ships, and treasures, so many treasures, pearls and jewels, and gold lay scattered about on the seabed, and the bones of dead sailors poked up out of the sand. "Here we are at last," cried the haddock, leading her into the palace. The poor little fish girl was exhausted from having swum so far and so fast, but she was struck by the beauty all around her, for the walls were made of pale pink coral, worn smooth by the waters, and around the windows were rows of pearls. The doors were standing open, and the whole troop floated into the great hall, where the queen, half woman, half fish, was seated on a throne of blue and green shell. "Who have we here?" she asked, and the little fish girl told her story. "Now, sit down here beside me," said the queen when she had finished, "and I shall tell you my own story, for I also was once a girl. I married a prince and became queen of faraway country. But a year later, when I was out in the garden with my baby son, a giant appeared and stole my crown. He told me he would give it to his daughter and enchant my husband so that he would think she was his wife, not me. I was so upset when I heard this that I threw myself into the sea, and my ladies in waiting, who loved me, followed me in. And here I must remain until someone brings me back my crown." "I will fetch it for you," cried the little fish girl, for she was desperate to get back on dry land, whatever the cost. "Do you think you could?" The queen studied her face. "First, You must find the giant's castle on the top of a high mountain, for I've heard that his daughter has since dead, and the giant has the crown once more." "I'll try," said the brave little fish girl. "Good luck then, but you must be careful, for if the foul and horrible giant sees you, he will surely kill you. All I can give you to help you in your quest is the power to change into any animals you wish. Just strike your forehead and call out its name." The next morning, the fish girl swam to shore, and when she got there, she struck her forehead with her tail. "I want to be a deer," she cried, and that moment she became a beautiful proud beast with branching horns and slender legs, throwing back her head and sniffing the air. She broke into a run, leaping easily over the rivers, walls, and hedges that stood in her way. Now the king's son was out hunting, and he spotted the deer. He raced after her on his swift-footed horse, and soon caught up. "Please do not kill me," the deer cried, pleading with her eyes, "for I have far to run and much to do." The prince was amazed to hear a deer speak, and captivated by the beauty in her eyes. "This must surely be an enchanted maiden," he muttered to himself as she raced free. "I will marry her and no other." But the deer had gone, and, try as he might, he could not find her. When she arrived at the giant's castle, the walls were too high to jump. "I will be an ant," she cried, and then she became a tiny insect, scuttling up the wall. Soon she was over the top and down in the courtyard, where she spied a tall tree reaching up a high window. "And now I'll be a monkey," she whispered, and in a second, a loose-limbed little monkey was swinging up through the branches and into the room where the giant lay snoring. Then, "A parrot," she cried, and flying onto the giant's shoulder, she squawked in his ear. "The crown is no longer yours, big fellow, now that your daughter is dead." "What?" growled the giant, reaching out to grab the insolent bird. "Spare me," the parrot squawked. "Please spare me."
"Why should I?"
The giant tightened his grip.
"Why should I take pity on a puny little pirate who sneaks into my room, wakes me up by screeching into my ear, and tells me I have to give up my crown?"
But then a thought slowly began to seep into his tiny brain, and he put down the frightened bird in order to scratch his head.
"Not unless you can bring me the thing I've always wanted. A collar of blue stones from the Arch of St. Martin in the great city."
"I'll do it straight away," said the parrot, hopping over to the window. She had no idea how she would manage it, but she was not going to tell the ugly great giant that. "I want to be an eagle," she cried,
and quick as a flash, she became one, soaring high above the clouds. Soon she was flying over the great city, spotting the famous arch, all set with beautiful stones. She swooped down and began to dig them out with her beak. It was hard work and painful, but eventually she had pried out enough to make a collar for the giant. Stringing them onto a piece of string she had found hanging in the tree, she dangled it around her neck. Now I want to be a parrot again. And when she arrived back at the giant's castle, she flew up into his room and perched on his shoulder. Back already? Growled the big fellow. Then he noticed the collar of stones and, grabbing it, delighted, hang it around his bulgy neck. Now you must give me the crown, as we agreed. The parrot squawked, but the greedy giant had other ideas. They are not as blue as I thought, he complained, removing the necklace and holding the stones up to the light, pretending to be disappointed. What I really want is a crown of stars from the sky. Go and bring me that instead. The parrot was angry at being cheated, but she knew she was no match for the giant. A toad! I will be a toad, she cried as soon as she had left the room, and sure enough she was one, hopping off in search of the stars. She had not gone far when she came to a clear pool. Staring into the water, she saw the stars of the night sky, reflected so brightly that they looked real enough to hold. Scooping some up and popping them into her bag, she hopped back to the castle and made them into a crown. Here is your crown of stars, she squawked, having turned herself back into a parrot. And the ugly great giant cried out with wonder at their beauty. That's more like it, he exclaimed in delight, crushing the crown onto his head. Here, take the queen's crown, for this one is better by far. The parrot seized it from the giant's hand and flew to the window. Make me into a monkey, she squawked as she clambered down the tree that stood outside. Make me an ant, and she crowed up and over the high wall. Then, a deer, she squawked, and, as a fleet-footed deer, she raced over walls and rivers until she came to the sea. And now a fish, she cried, plunging into the water and swimming to the beautiful underwater palace, where the queen and all the creatures of the sea were gathered together, waiting for her. But they had been waiting a long, long time, and some of them had quite given up hope of ever seeing her again. I'm tired of all this waiting, grumbled one. I want to see what is happening up above. It must be months since that silly little fish girl went away. I'd say the nasty giants killed her, or she would have been back long ago, said another. The river flies will be out by now, and we will miss our chance to catch them, complained a third. At that very moment, a voice from behind them cried, Look! Look at that sparkle of brightness flashing towards us.
The crowd fell silent, and the queen rose up on her tail with excitement. In came the little fish girl, holding the crown tightly in her mouth, and all of the other sea creatures moved aside to let her pass. On she swam right to the mermaid queen, who took hold of the beautiful crown and placed it on her head. And then a wonderful thing happened. The queen's tail turned into legs, and her handmaidens, all around her, shed their scales and became girls again. They stood around, admiring one another and then admiring the little fish, who had regained her own shape and was more beautiful than any of them. "You have given us back our life," they cried, crowding around her and weeping from joy. They soon said farewell to the creatures of the sea and returned to land. The queen was thrilled to see her husband again, and particularly pleased to see her son, for she had left when he was only a baby in arms. But there was an air of sadness about the young man, even though his mother had returned at last. "What's wrong, my dear?" she asked him as they walked together in the garden. "If I can give you happiness, it will be yours." "No one can," said the prince sadly, "for I have fallen in love with someone I can never marry, and I must carry my sadness alone." And he told her about the deer in the forest, and how he had fallen head over heels in love with her as soon as he looked into her eyes. "Ah," said the queen with a smile, "I think I know how to help you." For she knew right away that it was the fisherman's daughter that her son had encountered. She called for the girl, who had not yet returned home to her parents, and when the prince saw her, he was struck dumb by the beauty of her. The young woman came closer, and her eyes were those of the deer in the forest. "Please do not kill me," she whispered in the prince's ear, "for I have far to run and much to do." "The very words you used when we met in the forest. I have found you at last, my love." The young man took her in his arms, and their hearts were filled with joy. And the queen, his mother, watched them and smiled. The queen and king, the prince and the fish girl princess, have lived happily ever after. Thank you for listening, boys and girls. This is from Your Story Fairies. Have a good night. Sweet dreams.